So I'm Sonia Johnson. I'm a professor in the Division of Psychiatry at UCL. Welcome everyone to this open evening, which is in a somewhat different format, to say the least, from any we've had before, but actually we're quite excited that that's attracted a big attendance and level of interest. So we hope this will work well. So this is, although our MSc program and our PhD program is very much for both clinicians and non-clinicians, our focus this evening is going to be on clinicians and their pathways into research careers, because that's something we're especially interested in promoting, although we do have lots and lots of MSc and PhD students and other staff who are working as, who are not clinicians, but this evening is about clinicians. So the format is going to be that we have a series of talks. I'm seeing some people saying they can't hear. Is that a general problem? Can some people hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
I can hear you.
Okay, I assume as a lot of people are saying they can hear me, that if you can't hear, it's at your end rather than ours. Perhaps someone can put that in the chat as well. So that people need to join computer audio to be able to hear this okay on Zoom. We're going to encourage you with questions you have as we go along to put the questions in the chat area, and we'll either answer them as we go along if it seems straightforward to do so, or if it's not so straightforward, we'll keep them either for the speakers or for question time at the end. So we've got a number of short talks. The first few are focusing on our MSCs and what they offer, and then on PhD study and research careers more generally. And we've got a bit of time for Q&A at the end, so that's what it's going to look like. But basically put your questions in the chat for now and we'll make sure that we get to them at some point. So I'm going to start by introducing the head of the Division of Psychiatry, who's Professor Glyn, and he is going to say something about our division and what it offers in general at UCL. And if I suggest that for this kind of event, whilst if you kind of go to a Zoom party gallery view may be the thing, probably you're better off for these talks on speaker view on your, if you're not familiar with Zoom. So over to Glyn.
Thank you, Sonia. So yes, I'm Glyn Lewis. I'm Director of the Division of Psychiatry. And I just wanted to say a few words about the division and to explain a bit about what we do and why we think we're a good place for you to consider an academic career. So our mission statement, which is on the website, says most of what I need to say. We're an interdisciplinary centre for research and teaching concerned with mental health and illness. Our aim is to address clinical problems in order to achieve benefits for patients and public health, using insights from basic science. We deliver innovative teaching relevant to clinical practice that is informed by our research. And so we, in the sense of that, we are very interdisciplinary. We have people right from molecular geneticists to anthropologists. And we are in the main focusing on things which do make a difference, either to policy or patients or understanding about mental illness. Perhaps what's not clear from that is that we also have a big commitment and a great track record in helping people develop their careers in academia. So for example, at the moment, we've got 7 clinicians on fellowships funding their PhD studies, and we have 12 postdoctoral fellows. About half of those are clinicians and half are non-clinicians. We've got a large PhD program, which also, of course, includes non-clinicians, and I think Liz Sampson will be talking a bit about that later. and part of that is also about the sort of gender equality. And I'm very proud to say that more than half our professors in the division are women. And that's been something we've actively, well, we haven't really needed to encourage it because they're all got there by their own merits, of course, but it is a great, it's an unusual feature, perhaps, of our division. What's also great about working in UCL is that the medical school in UCL has great opportunities for collaboration and particularly relevant types of collaboration for mental health. The neuroscience in UCL is excellent. There are also, you know, big and excellent epidemiology departments, and indeed, you know, I think all the people in the division who do research collaborate with other people in UCL. It's a great environment to where you can turn to the real experts in whatever area you're interested in. I suppose finally, I just wanted to say, you know, why do we do research? And, you know, as I said, our research is, we try to make it focus on practical and important problems. And from my point of view as a doctor, I suppose I feel that I can help more people through research than just those people I see as a clinician. And the ability to sort of add to knowledge is a great privilege, really. And I've yet to find someone who said we know everything we need to know in mental health research. We can now stop acquiring new knowledge. And I think perhaps in our specialty, more than many others, the need to understand more about mental illness, how to manage it better, you know, what sort of things might prevent it are, of course, an enormous need. So those really all that I wanted to say, and so I'll hand back to Sonia and for the rest of the programme.
Hey, thank you very much, Glyn. Well, maybe just to keep on time, yeah, actually, does anyone have any questions about the division for Glyn? If you want to either put your hand up or put something in the chat if you'd like to ask anything. There will be more opportunities for questions. Okay, well, thank you very much, Glyn. That's a very helpful introduction. So I'm going to talk about the MSc that we run in the Division of Psychiatry and why you might want to consider that if you're a clinician who's just contemplating stepping into a research career, a clinical academic research career. So I'm going to share my screen with you. That'll just take me a moment. Okay. And I'm going to attempt to go on slideshow. All right, so there's the UCL Portico, which is a site which some of us are somewhat longing to see again at the moment, but that's the iconic entrance to UCL. So why would you, if you're a clinician and you're contemplating a career which takes in research, why would you consider coming to UCL and doing our MSc? Well, basically a big reason is that it is very focused on providing the route you need to become a professional researcher if you're already qualified as a clinician. So clinicians tend to be taught a bit about research, but not kind of given the practical tools that they need to really start doing it in practice, and that's what we aim to do. So it's very practical, it's very rigorous. You get to do things like analyse real data sets, design questionnaires, write study protocols. It's altogether a very interactive and very practical experience. We also offer, as I'll show you in a moment, a highly varied choice of modules. We've made it as flexible as we possibly can within UCL regulations. So there's a part-time route where you do it over 2 years, but many of the clinicians who do it take a flexible modular route, which means you can divide up the modules over up to 5 years. We offer research projects which are on many different topics and with many leading research groups, and for a lot of people this results in publications, particularly for a lot of our clinicians, and quite a lot of people have continued to collaborate with people they worked with for research projects. And another reason, a big reason for people to come to UCL and do our masters, is that we have the particularly good fortune to have a large and supportive course team, including clinicians and non-clinicians. Just to give you a very brief overview of the content, modules, people who are clinicians actually usually don't do this clinical mental health module that's shown because they've covered that ground already, but they'll generally do a double module in core research methods and a single module in practical statistics. And then we'll choose the rest of their 8 modules between the variety of our division's modules that you can see on this slide. All of them are pretty research focused modules, and all of them have assessments which are very much about looking at the research and applying research methods in quite practical ways. There are also opportunities to take modules from across UCL, and a high proportion of our students will take 1 or 2 modules from elsewhere at UCL. These are some examples, but there are many options for taking modules elsewhere at UCL. So where does this lead? Well, as I've said, essentially what it can provide is a route into professional research for clinical staff. I think clinical staff who are interested in research often find it quite difficult to know where to start. And I think increasingly, given the sort of level at which you have to be to do research projects and get them published, it's quite hard to do that unless you have some sort of rigorous training in how to do research. And that's what we can provide. The route is towards, sometimes people think that they might have to choose between research and being a clinical person, but actually, particularly I think this is true for psychiatrists and psychologists, but also for some other types of professions, mostly people will carry on doing clinical work and do research and teaching alongside that. So it's not usually about choosing, it's usually about a sort of quite diverse and admittedly sometimes demanding career that combines all those things. We have lots of people who've stayed in research among our MSc graduates over the years, including several clinical professors, other senior researchers, a lot of people, some of whom you'll hear in a moment, who've gone on to funded PhDs, and then others who remain who take routes as primarily clinicians, but remain very interested in research, continue to collaborate actively in research projects. So that's essentially what our MSc pathway looks like. I'll stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions about MSc study in the division. Please either put them on chat or put your hand up or unmute and say something if you'd like to. Anything anyone would like to ask about the MSc study that we offer? Go on. We've got a couple. I found that events online tend to go quite fast. Okay, what prior research experience do you need to be successful in applying? Well, we're very keen to encourage applications from clinicians and to support clinicians in doing this. On the whole, so we're not demanding of previous research experience. On the whole, we'd like you to have a CV that suggests that you're reasonably academically able, so that you'll be able to cope with what's a fairly rigorous and fast-moving course. Our approach is that we start from scratch and we tell you everything that you might need to know about research methods, but it does move quite quickly and the assessments are fairly demanding. We put lots of stuff online in the hope that so that people can catch up and fill in gaps and look further into areas where they're not familiar, but it does move quite quickly from a sort of starting from scratch basis. Can you do it long distance is a bit of a moot point at the moment, in that we know that our MSc will run next year, but what the exact format is and the extent to which there will be online options is something we cannot yet tell you. Can you combine part-time with core training? Yes, most of the clinicians who do this course, actually I think the majority do it as flexible, on the flexible route, and will take modules alongside their clinical work. We're very happy to talk to you about how that fits. I would say if you're a full-time clinician, you're probably better doing the flexible route and you'll need half a day to a day negotiated with your employer to be able to accommodate that. If you're going to take it in 2 years, you probably need at least a day a week and possibly a bit more off. Or there are various clinicians who found ways, like Chloe, who's going to talk to you in a minute, who found ways of taking the course full time. Module choice, we would certainly encourage you to do something you haven't already, you don't already have knowledge of, although it's also obviously a good idea to think about how your career might shape. Any chance to participate as a collaborator or volunteer researcher? Absolutely. So at the moment, this is particularly to the fore, because I and my group in the policy research unit are doing some rapid research on the impact of on mental health care of the current pandemic, and my colleague Jo Billings is also working on the impact of the pandemic from a trauma point of view. And I think we have at the moment about 40 of our MSc students and a number of PhD students who are helping in various kind of highly valuable ways with that research. But in general, yes, there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in the division's research, and I would say that that's one of the advantages basically of coming to the division. Okay, so I think it's time to move on, but please hang on to your questions or put them on the chat, and we'll either answer them straight away or keep them to be answered at the end of talks or in the Q&A section at the end. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to James, who is a lecturer on the MSc course. He's one of a core team of 8 staff. It also includes Lisa, who's organised the event and will talk later. And he's going to tell you about the research projects, which are a particularly important component of what we offer. So over to James.
Hey, thanks, Sonia. So I'm just sharing my screen, so hopefully you can see this. It's going to start the slides. Okay, so as Sonia said, I'm part of the core team, but I also coordinate the research projects which form a big part of the MSc. Now, I think research projects on the MSc are particularly exciting because it gives you a big opportunity to actually take some of the skills that you've been learning and developing during the MSc and use and build upon those to actually carry out an extensive piece of research on an area of mental health that you're particularly interested in. So the research project itself, we encourage you to address a research question which is relevant to understanding and managing mental health problems, but it can actually cover many different areas within mental health. So it's not just a research dissertation that we ask you to come up with at the end, but we also get you to learn lots of other skills which are part of, you know, designing research, coming up with research and presenting it in an oral presentation, and also disseminating it to non-academics. So we get you to write a blog as well. But one of the end products is we want you to create a piece of research which is suitable for publication in a peer-reviewed journal. And that's something that we actively encourage as part of the course. And it's something that our students have been very successful in doing. And I'd really encourage you to just go onto our website, and there is a good list of many of the journal articles which have been published, which have come from research from our previous MSc students. I've just picked a few here. So I think one of the strengths in the division, and this particularly works well with carrying out a research project, is the diverse areas within mental health that we have lots of expertise in. And that ranges from sort of people doing epidemiological studies, looking at risk factors, for example, and major conditions, people carrying out investigations of psychological, social interventions, and also at the other end of the spectrum, looking at neuroscience studies, so including genetics, neuroimaging, looking at particular mental health conditions. And, you know, so there's a diverse range of topics that you can cover, and also looking at cultural and social influences on mental health and mental health care. There's also a variety of different clinical populations that people researching it within the division look at. So I've just named a few here as examples, but it's very broad again. So for example, we have experts looking at dementia, psychosis, intellectual disability, depression, trauma, and ASD. And these are all topics which you can choose to do a research project in. We're also a very collaborative group and division. So it's not just people within the Division of Psychiatry that you might choose to work with when you're carrying out a research project. There are also lots of ongoing projects which form links with external supervisors. So for example, we have many colleagues across UCL, so in departments such as psychology and other clinical psychologists. Many of the clinicians on the course also work in NHS trusts, and some of the research projects are based within these trusts. And also linking up with other academics at other universities, and also within industry and other charities. So there are a lot of strengths and a lot of different areas and topics in which you can carry out a research project. So just thinking about the types of projects that people often choose to do. Sometimes people come with their own project in mind. They might have a specific area of mental health that they're interested in, and a specific research question that they want to try and answer during the project. And that's absolutely fine, and would involve just finding somebody within the division, maybe within that research area, who can help to supervise that project. But also many of the students, we offer lots of different projects to the students that they can choose and find one which they're interested in. So you don't have to come with your own project. And these can include things like carrying out a systematic review to look at current evidence within an area of mental health. It could involve analyzing data that already exists, so publicly available data sets that numerous academics in the department have access to. Or it could be an add-on, so coming up with a research question and adding it onto one of the ongoing studies in the division. There are also opportunities to carry out small-scale data collection studies, so surveys, online questionnaires, for example, looking at the general population within NHS, or even small-scale experimental studies, so for example, looking at mechanisms within neuroscience. So that's about it for me. I hope that's, in a glance, just giving you a broad idea of what the research projects on the MSc involve. I'll take some questions now, but I'll also stick around until the end to answer any questions that you might think of between now and the end of the session. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to keep to time? So maybe if you either put questions to James in the chat, he can pick them up, or others in the team can, or as I say, there's a bit more time for questions at the end. So the next speaker, we've been talking mainly about the MSc in Mental Health Sciences Research, which is the sort of general MSc that's taken by clinicians who come to our division, but we also run a variant of that that's specifically focused on dementia research, and the next 5 minutes are for Nick Bass, who's director of that part of our MSc provision, to just introduce you to that specific MSc. Nick's here, isn't he?
I am, yes. Thank you, Sonia.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm the director for the Dementia MSc Mental Health pathway, and I'm also an old age psychiatrist working in a memory clinic in East London. What I thought I'd do just to begin with is just say a little bit about UCL and dementia, really a kind of sales pitch. So UCL has a world-leading research portfolio for dementia, spanning basic genetics to evidence-based interventions for patients and carers. And in 2016, it became the hub of the UK Dementia Research Institute. Actually, dementia research activity is quite spread across UCL and is very diverse in its nature. But there are two concentrations of dementia research in the Division of Psychiatry and also in the Institute of Neurology. And just thinking about the Division of Psychiatry, it's a major contributor to dementia research in the areas of prevention, psychological therapies and end-of-life care. And many of you may have seen the Lancet Commission on Dementia, which was led by one of the professors in our department, Jill Livingstone, and also had contributions from many of the other members of the division. So I'll go on now and talk a little bit about the Dementia MSc itself. So technically it's offered jointly by the Division of Psychiatry and the Institute of Neurology, Queen Square. Within it there are two pathways, the neuroscience pathway and the mental health pathway. But this evening I'm going to talk about the mental health pathway, which is based in the Division of Psychiatry, although there is some overlap between the two pathways. Yeah, what do we hope to achieve through the MSc? What is the aim of the MSc? So really to familiarise students with cutting-edge research into the causes, prevention, detection and management of the dementias, but also to train students in a range of research methodologies, particularly epidemiological, psychosocial and clinical trials methodology, which Sonia's already talked about a little bit. So I think people will, the sort of advanced knowledge of dementia that people will gain through the course obviously will inform clinical practice, but it will certainly also a suitable course for clinicians wishing to explore or begin a research career in dementia. So who should apply? I think it's highly suitable for clinicians that are both working or intending to work in mental health care of older people. In the past, we've had clinicians from a variety of backgrounds, psychiatry, occupational therapy and nursing, and generally on the course there's a good mixture of clinicians and people who've come directly from undergraduate degrees, often psychology. So the same for the other MScs. You can take the course full-time or 2 years part-time or flexibly up to 5 years, and you apply for one of the pathways, hopefully the mental health pathway, not the neuroscience pathway, but you have to apply for one of the pathways. Like all UCL courses, it's modular, and you have compulsory modules which are based in the Division of Psychiatry in the Institute of Neurology, optional modules, and the research project. So unfortunately, I haven't got any sort of slides to share with you, but on the UCL website, you can see an exemplar of the modules. The compulsory modules at the moment are advanced treatment and management of dementia, current research in dementia, which I coordinate along with Nahid Mukadam, and also core principles of mental health research, which is in fact a double module. The teaching is mainly done by clinical academics within the Division of Psychiatry, including Professors Claudia Cooper, Liz Sampson, Susanna Walker, and Jill Livingstone, and Rob Howard, who are all international leaders in their field of dementia. And there's also one compulsory module provided by the Institute of Neurology. So, as Sonia has already said, there's a wide range of optional modules, which either you can take from the Division of Psychiatry or for the Institute of Neurology, but you can also spread your wings further and look for suitable modules outside the Division and Institute, if that sort of reasonably relates to the course and your personal aims, and that it's compatible with the timetable. So finally, I just want to say that the Dementia MSc is very closely connected with the other MScs provided by the division, and we share study groups, journal clubs, and generic workshops, and the personal tutoring system. So that was all I was going to say about the Dementia MSc, but I'll stick around for questions at the end.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Nick. And again, you can post, if Nick keeps an eye on the chat, you can also post any specific questions on the chat regarding the Dementia MSc. Okay, we're now going to move on more to the next stage in the pathway, which is more often taken when people have already done a master's degree, which is PhD study. And I'm going to just like to introduce Professor Liz Sampson, who is one of the 2 postgraduate tutors who run PhD study in our division, and she's going to talk about PhD opportunities, again, particularly in relation to clinicians. Thank you, Liz. Liz, we can't hear you. I don't know if you are. We can see your slides, but not hear you.
I'm just going to give a very brief overview of the sorts of opportunities and some examples of the people who've gone through our PhD program in the division. So I guess the first thing is, why would you want to do a PhD as a clinician? And about 5% of the UK clinical consultant workforce have PhDs and work in clinical academia at the moment, and the PhD is a kind of a gateway into that clinical academic role. I can't find figures on nursing or allied health professionals, but it really helps to get you onto that route. Obviously, it goes without saying that it's hard work, and you have to actually do one because you really want to do one. But it leads into a future in research or teaching across a range of areas. But what I would say is that we've had a significant number of clinicians taking PhDs who haven't gone into pure clinical academic jobs. So they've gone back to clinical world and have had very successful clinical careers using the skills that they learned through doing a PhD. So whether that's being able to handle data, methodologies, synthesizing evidence, it stood them in really good stead for very good clinical careers and management within the NHS. So you learn a lot of transferable skills as well by doing the PhD, and it also opens up alternate career pathways. So should you ever wish to leave the NHS or take on other dual roles in management, government, third sector or industry, it can be very helpful. One of the great things about doing a PhD, obviously not at the moment, is that it opens up opportunities for international collaboration that you wouldn't necessarily have just by staying on a straight clinical pathway. And the other thing I'd really like to mention is that the PhD programme is very, very flexible. So we've had people doing PhDs with us who've had 1, 2, 3 children, who have left at various times of leave for family caring responsibilities. And UCL is very flexible about time out of PhD studies for those reasons. So you can either do it full-time in a minimum of 3 years, or part-time in a minimum of 4 to 5 years. But there's a great deal of flexibility built into the programme. So in terms of the PhD team at UCL, we have got 65 PhD students currently, so we're a large and very sort of vibrant PhD community, and because of that we have 2 postgrad tutors, myself and Claudia Cooper, and our email addresses are there if you want to get in touch with us. We've got 12 clinicians at the moment doing PhDs with us, from the UK, but also from a range of overseas countries, so Taiwan, Thailand, Republic of Ireland, Denmark, a whole host of nations represented. In terms of psychiatry, we have people from general adult, old age, learning disability backgrounds. We also have psychologists, we have geriatricians, palliative care specialists, and people with nursing and occupational therapy. So it's not just about doctors, clinical doctors doing PhDs. There's a broad range of clinicians from different backgrounds who are either doing PhDs with us currently or have completed those in the past. In terms of the kind of student experience, a lot depends on your clinical background, but most people will maintain some clinical contact during their PhD, particularly if they need to keep up their professional validation. You will be automatically and compulsorily engaged in the UCL Doctoral Skills Programme, which is based on this VITE model, the circle you see there. It's a very comprehensive programme of skills and learning. Some of it's generic transferable skills, such as leadership, management training. Other courses are more research focused, so methods, qualitative, data analysis, quantitative methods. There really are hundreds of courses and trainings that you can do registered with the doctoral school. There's a wide range of multidisciplinary support in our division, so we have a very active and lively PhD student group. There's qualitative researchers groups, there's statistical researcher groups such as the R user group. We have regular neurosciences meeting, an epidemiological strategy group, an old age group. And you can go to all of those if you want to, so you don't just have to stick to your field, you can experience all of those specialities. And you will also have the opportunity to do teaching and supervision at MSc and undergraduate levels as well, if you want to. In terms of your supervision, we have a huge number of supervisors available to us from a range of backgrounds, and what we suggest prospective students do is to look on our divisional website and read the biographies and the interests of potential supervisors. You'll have a primary and a secondary supervisor to guide your studies, but also in the last year, UCL have introduced thesis committees, and this means you'll also have 3 extra WISE heads, and your thesis committee will meet regularly 5 times over the course of your PhD, and that's been amazing. We've been able to bring in expertise from all over UCL into people's thesis committees for learning, guidance, student support. It's really enriched our student experience. And as already mentioned, many of our students work across UCL, so we have people working with the Institute of Child Health, students with Great Ormond Street, Institute of Neurology, Psychology and Language Sciences, Primary Care and Population Health. So it's a very flexible pathway according to the needs of the student. And then just finally, here are some examples of some of the current PhD projects going on amongst our clinical PhD students at the moment. We have Farhana's researching loneliness in severe mental illness. Top right corner is Dr. PJ Chen, who's a geriatrician from Taiwan, who's looking at large data and healthcare and palliative care in the Taiwanese population. We have other people looking at child and adolescence topics, and Rory in the bottom left, who's just completed studies, was looking at psychotropic medication. And we have PhD students of all ages, all cultural backgrounds, and a number of nursing students with us as well. So that's just a very brief overview of what PhD is like in our division, and the wide range of opportunities available to you. and I finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Any questions specifically for Liz? We've had a couple in the chat, but anything anyone would particularly like to know from Liz, if you either unmute and ask or put it in the chat. Okay, well, there'll be further time to ask about PhDs at the end, and I think more will be revealed as people talk about their particular experiences. I'm now going to hand over to Alexandra Pitman, who's an associate professor in the division and has a role in leading on the MSc provision for clinicians and helping clinicians access our MScs, and she's going to chair the next bit. So over to Alexandra.
Hello. So in the next section, we've got half an hour to hear from 5 different people who are all clinicians and are going to tell you a little bit about their own experiences of pursuing a clinical academic career. And we're going to start with Chloe Kitto, who joins us from the Nightingale Hospital, where she's been working for the last few weeks. And she's an occupational therapist who's studying our MSc full-time, and she's going to give us 5 minutes on her personal journey. Chloe.
Yeah, thank you. So I will be quick with my 5 minutes. I have been an occupational therapist for just over 12 years, half of that in psychiatric settings and the other half in chronic and complex pain settings. I have been working in England for the last 6 years, and as an occupational therapist in chronic pain, got to the point where I wasn't seeing any research that defined the OT role in pain, and got to the point of frustration, which then turned into action, and decided that I need to start doing some research myself. In my undergraduate of occupational therapy in Australia, we had a small taster of research, but I found when I was trying to do it in my hospital setting in a full-time job, I just wasn't able to get anything off the ground, really. So I looked into several masters and felt that the UCL one had an amazing reputation, and actually the practical, the focus on practical and real life and modern skills was something that really attracted me. And now that I'm halfway through or 2/3 way through, I say the same thing. So when Sonia was introducing it before, it is extraordinarily practical. And if you want to be a researcher, especially in mental health, but actually in any kind of complex biopsychosocial field, I think this gives you lots of transferable skills. And I say that because the last 6 weeks at the Nightingale, I've done a lot of novel interventions, rapid research, and I 100% would not have been able to do that without the skills that I've learned. So I think that's just been a huge realization recently. So for me, I chose to take a year off my work, and my hospital trust was supportive of this. They gave me a 12-month sabbatical. I would not learn well part-time personally. I know myself enough to know that I have to be immersed in something. I don't have a research background, so for me, it was learning from almost zero. And again, I'll echo what Sonia said. The course it starts off basic, but it goes quickly and deeply. But I think you have to be passionate about research to be able to kind of to be able to do well. I think if you're looking for something to coast through, this isn't it. But as someone who came from not very heavy research background, I found it pitched appropriately for me. So I think moving forward, I'll go back to my job, and I'm going to try and talk to my work about how to make time to do more research in my current role. Yeah, I think that's all from me. Just your microphone.
Sorry, thank you for that, Chloe. So we're going to move on to the next speaker. There's a chance for questions at the end. And we're joined by Natalie Shoham, who works as a higher trainee in psychiatry at Camden and Islington NHS Foundation Trust. And she's also working in the UCL Division of Psychiatry as a researcher and has recently gained a competitive NIHR research training fellowship to do her PhD. Natalie.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen with you, hopefully. Just help me keep to time. So the first slide is where I work at the moment. This is St Pancras Hospital, where I work as a Registrar of General Adult Psychiatry. When I started as a psychiatry registrar, I was a dual trainee in general adult and older adult psychiatry. And to be honest, I had no ideas really about doing an academic career. It wasn't something I'd seriously considered, although I'd always thought that research sounded very interesting. I think I had an idea that it was something people who were top of their course at university did, and that wasn't me, to be very honest. So I was working in the Islington Memory Service doing lots of these examinations, which many of you will recognise. And registrars are very lucky in psychiatry. We have a special interest day once a week. And I was quite keen to do a qualification in teaching at first. But I was working with a professor who's been mentioned already. And she said, well, what about this course, this Mental Health Sciences Research MSc? So I had a look at the prospectus and the website, and I saw that it was a really broad course that would teach you lots of research techniques, but also teach you lots of clinically relevant cutting-edge research. I saw that there was lots of contact time, which for me was a big positive about the course. And it seemed like it would be something that would be very interesting and a day I could enjoy. So I did take the advice of this professor, and I applied for the Mental Health Sciences Research MSc. So it should change. The course started in September, and one of the big perks of the course was the lectures themselves, actually, which were just very interesting. We got to hear from lots of people doing, you know, the latest research. There are also people from a whole variety of backgrounds on the course. So sometimes we got to have debates with people who had very different views about how mental illness should be treated, and that in itself was sort of challenging some of my views and made me think a bit differently. So the first term of the course was quite intense. There were lots of assignments that you have to do, and if you're working full-time clinically, you'll probably find, like I did, that you have to do many of them in your own time on weekends and sometimes in your annual leave. But after the first term, the course does actually ease off a bit, and there are fewer assignments that you have to keep up with. So I think if you can just stick to that first term and do all of the things that you need to do, then it does get a lot more manageable. So a few cups of coffee were needed. But there was another thing that made this first term much more manageable on the next slide, and this was the study group. So the MSc team, I think, are very aware that there are unique challenges to working clinically and doing an MSc at the same time, even if you do have one day a week to do it. So they put me in a study group with other clinicians, and we all, you know, understood the different pressures that each other was under, and we had a lot of fun together. We encouraged each other to stay on track. We helped each other, you know, complete group assignments and things like that. And I have to say, I really started to look forward to the special interest day and working with this group of people. We did have a champion in our group. This is Donald Winnicott, the psychotherapist who spoke about a mother's needing to be good enough rather than perfect. And to be honest, we worked very hard, but we also encouraged each other to take a good enough approach, because we thought it was important to have a balance, not to, you know, sort of burn ourselves out, but to make sure we looked after ourselves while studying and working together. And actually that worked for us. Everyone in our group did well, and I think the good enough approach was the right one while still working hard. Then the opportunity to apply for an academic clinical fellowship came up, and after thinking about it for a bit, I did apply for that post. And in the interviewers asked a lot of questions about the MSc. I think it was definitely one of the things that helped me to get the post, if not the main thing. Obviously, there are pros and cons to working in academia, as with anything. I think it's very exciting when you can have a paper published for the first time. There's also obviously a lot that you can learn about your clinical job by doing academia, and a lot that you can sort of think about in your academic job by doing clinical work. One of the downsides is it can feel like you're running between places a lot, especially if, like me, you're working in a split job. So I have a community job, an inpatient job, and now an academic job. So sometimes it can feel like you have to be very organised to stay on top of these. And I can sometimes think that I'm not giving quite enough to each clinical team. But having said that, I think clinical teams do very quickly adjust, and they know when you're going to be there. And actually, I realise there are lots of people that are there part-time for all kinds of reasons. So it does work. One of the best things about working in the Division of Psychiatry in UCL is the support that I've received from everybody. This cup of coffee represents lots of helpful coffee breaks with other people. A few clinical colleagues have actually asked me if academia has a bad atmosphere, because they've obviously heard some horror stories, and I've been able to tell them I've experienced absolutely nothing like that, quite the opposite. So many people in the division have helped me prepare for PhD fellowship applications, and just with research ideas generally, everyone's willing to sort of sit down, have a coffee and help in the chat. And I think as a result of all of that support I've had from the division, I am now going on to do a PhD funded by NIHR, as Alexandra said. So I'm very grateful, and I've very much enjoyed having the balance between academic and clinical work overall.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Natalie. Now I'm going to move on to Andrew Sommerlad, who's a consultant psychiatrist in the Psychiatry of Older Adults, and he did his PhD in the UCL Division of Psychiatry. Andrew.
Hello there. Hi. I'm just going to also try and share a few slides, although I can't see them at the moment. Let's see if I can. I'm going to be the only person who manages to fail to do this successfully. Dear me, sorry.
No, it's coming up. We can see it.
Hopefully you're all able to see that. Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah. So as Alexandra said, I'm now working as a postdoctoral research fellow in the UCL Division of Psychiatry, and I work as a consultant old age psychiatrist. I do clinical work at the Royal Free Hospital, and I've been working in the division now for 6 or 7 years, and I thought I'd just talk initially about why I was interested in working in academic psychiatry. What are some of the benefits? And of course, the sort of interview answer is the academic interest that certainly I think all of us feel. If you work clinically day after day, you can certainly generate lots of interesting research questions and areas that you want to find out more about. And so I do work in social epidemiology and dementia, and I think I find the kind of combination of thinking about a brain disorder and how it affects people socially as being particularly interesting. To mention some other things that other people have already touched on, there is the opportunity for attending conferences, travel that I don't think I would get if I were working fully clinically. There's a huge amount of flexibility, and I have the opportunity. Over the last couple of years, we've had a few children who you might end up hearing in the background, and apologies for that if that's the case. But working in academic settings has given me a lot of flexibility to be able to spend time with them. And I've been working part-time over the last, working 4 days a week over the last couple of years, which has given me time to look after my son. There's lots of opportunity for teaching medical students and psychiatry trainees and other people, for public engagement. And I think certainly some people would view that the opportunity to get away from clinical practice is an opportunity. I think there are clearly downsides to it, and I think the other side of the coin of flexibility of work is that work is always there. So you do have to get used to the fact that you could always do more, and learn skills to be able to kind of balance that together. But I think that's something that comes with time. As I think I'll show, rejection in academic settings is common. So that's something again that's difficult to deal with. Continues to be difficult to deal with if papers are rejected, and but it's something that the counterpoint is as Natalie mentioned, the huge excitement when you're able to publish a piece of research or there's interest in it. and of course you get less clinical time, and that's not for everyone. So I thought I'd just show the ideal picture of what an academic training program is. After leaving medical school, this is as a doctor leaving medical school, you do academic foundation training, go into specialist training, take time out to do a PhD after about 3 years, and then seamlessly transition into subsequent academic positions. But that very much wasn't my experience personally, so I applied for these for academic foundation program and for an academic clinical fellowship, and didn't get these positions initially. So I think the persistence to be able to follow that through is an important feature that that you develop over time. So the facts of what I've ended up doing, I got an academic fellowship at ST4 level, so higher trainee level, in 2013 within the Division of Psychiatry. At that time I started doing the Masters, so this was the old incarnation of the MSc that you're hearing about today, which was certainly good training, although the having done the previous Masters and now involved in teaching and supervising on the current Masters, there's so much more to be said for the current MSc and the support and the training that's offered through it. After 3 attempts, I got a PhD fellowship funded by the Wellcome Trust in 2015, and as you can see, that followed being awarded the Masters. And I think there's no doubt that one of the huge factors in getting that PhD fellowship, as well as slightly improving the project each time that I applied, was having been awarded a Masters at that point. So I was able to go to interviews and say, look at this training that I've had, and I think that showed interest, it showed skills, and it also showed persistence to people when I was applying for the PhD. I got my CCT earlier on this year, and I'm now doing a postdoctoral fellowship, and I think that's one of the features, maybe it hasn't been mentioned yet. The Division of Psychiatry is very supportive of people after completing PhDs. So there are more opportunities now than there were a number of years ago. So there are opportunities to do 1 year bridging fellowship, 1 year pre-doctoral fellowships within the Division of Psychiatry. There are opportunities for postdoctoral bridging funding, which a number of people before me and now myself are undertaking, and this is giving me support to apply for further research funding. So just to touch briefly on the MSc, as I said, it certainly provided really high quality teaching, and there was a real variety of topics that were available. For me, it fitted into the special interest sessions that came with my academic clinical fellowship, although I know other people's experience, people have had a range of different experiences with that. I was able to publish papers that I'd done during the course of the MSc, and I now supervise students, and they've all completed their research projects that James was talking about earlier and published those papers. So there is a really good track record for getting something very tangible in addition to the Masters. And after the MSc, again, so of the MSc I did was much smaller, 9 people did it, but a third of us have now completed PhDs and are in academic posts, at least a third of us. So that's one route, is to follow a very academic route. Others can contribute to research led by other people, so working primarily clinically, but having a really good research grounding to be able to be involved in other research. And the skills that you learn during the course of the Masters certainly equip you to be able to produce other high quality pieces of work, like high quality audits or quality improvement projects, or be involved in teaching. So I think the messages that I would have are to think about areas that you're interested in and what you really see yourself wanting to do, because there's a range of different opportunities. Talk to potential supervisors within the Division of Psychiatry, or other departments, and I'll jump straight to the bottom, talk to us as well. There's lots of us more junior people who would be really happy to discuss these things with you directly. So my email will be at the end, and I'm happy to speak. As Sonia said, there aren't huge expectations in terms of CV for the application at this stage, but you can certainly try and build your CV. and look for opportunities through ACFs, the Biomedical Research Centre fellowships, or other PhD schemes.
Andrew, I'm just going to interrupt you there. If you could flash up your final slide, please, and I'm going to move on to Dr. Lisa Wood. Thank you, Andrew. So Lisa is a clinical psychologist who also has a split academic teaching clinical role. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Alexandra. So I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. So yeah, I'm Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and specialist care pathway lead for acute and inpatient psychology in North East London. Also a national health research clinical lecturer and lecturer on the MSc programme at the Division of Psychiatry. So overall, my journey, my clinical academic journey has not been necessarily a straightforward one. So I thought it would be quite helpful for me to sort of briefly talk about my pathway, because I think often as allied health professionals, the clinical academic pathway is less clear. So I just wanted to briefly talk through my journey. So as others have mentioned, my journey into research began once I undertook my master's, which was a master's in research psychology. And it gave me a really important foundation in research, and I would highly recommend, if you're interested in a career in research and undertaking a research focused masters, as we've been talking about today, because it opened up doors and gave me lots of skills and experience that allowed me to develop and become a research assistant, which gave me my first opportunity to work on a NIHR funded large clinical research program, which really gave me insights into the clinical research world. So after being a research assistant, I moved on to my clinical training, so a doctorate in clinical psychology, which is a 3-year program, and it's obviously clinically focused but has research elements to it. But I just wanted to make sure that I utilised all the opportunities within that experience to continue with my passions for research. So I would take up opportunities on placements to do like clinical related research, service evaluations and audits, just to keep my sorts of research interests going throughout that. My first sort of post role was as a research clinical psychologist and a therapist on a randomised control trial delivering a psychological therapy for psychosis. These sorts of roles are relatively rare, but if you're interested in getting more research within your clinical roles, there are often clinical research roles out there available for allied health professionals, nurses and medics to be involved in clinical related research programs. So I would definitely keep an eye out for these sorts of things. After this role had sort of finished, I sort of went back to purely clinical work and worked as a clinical psychologist in acute mental health inpatient service, which is where I'm working currently. And because I wanted to maintain my research interests, I sort of networked straight away, got in contact with the local trust research and development department, making contacts and just seeing what opportunities were available there. And that's actually what led to me being able to sort of secure funding from my trust to actually undertake a PhD. So as Andrew and others have said, I did apply for doctoral fellowships but got rejected. So this was a very helpful way of me being able to continue with my academic career without being successful for these fellowships. So I completed my PhD part-time alongside a clinical role, and as others have also described, managing that has been a bit of a challenge in terms of you've got to be very good at timekeeping. But after my PhD, and again through networks within my local trusts and having contacts with the R&D department, I was notified about a bridging fellowship opportunity, which was a Hensel Clark Fellowship. So Clark's are local NIHR-based services which are interested in getting clinicians involved in research. They have them located across the country. I'd definitely recommend looking them up if you're interested in research, because they have lots of opportunities available for clinicians. This funded me for 12 months and brought me out of my clinical time to allow me to have the opportunity to apply for further funding. And this fellowship was with Professor Sonia Johnson, and that's what led me to come into the Division of Psychiatry. And I definitely would say that this opened doors for me. So that having that time bought out of my clinical role allowed me to apply for the NIHR clinical lectureship, which is what I'm currently on at the moment, and also alongside my role as clinical lecturer on the MSc programme. So quickly to go through some sort of pros and cons of a clinical academic career. And for me, having the balance of clinical work and research is really important, and I feel like it strengthens both my roles simultaneously at the same time. It allows me to do really clinically relevant and meaningful research. I really enjoy the diversity in my working week, and it allows me to pursue my passions and interests. The cons, I think the path of a clinical academic career for allied health professionals is less clear. So it's quite unpredictable, and you have to be quite flexible and tolerate a lot of uncertainty and just take opportunities as they come up. And rejection, as has been mentioned, is part and parcel of the career, so you have to get sort of used to that as well. If I was giving some tips for any of those of you who want to pursue a clinical academic career and integrate research into it, I'd say make the most of opportunities when they arise and seek out opportunities. Network, I think, is really important to that. And follow your passions and interests, because that will get you through the more difficult and challenging days. I do really feel like relationships are really key, so network and collaborate with people who have similar interests to you, similar values that you can work well with. Find supportive supervisors and managers. I think this is the most important tip for me, because it's allowed me to take up opportunities that perhaps I wouldn't have been able to if my managers weren't really supportive of what I was trying to do. And be okay with rejection. It's all part of the process, and you kind of get used to it after a while as well.
Great, Lisa, thank you so much. Can you just bring up the final set of slides to share? Because I'm just going to sum up with a couple of slides for the end of this section before we break for the questions and answers. So just to introduce myself, I work in the UCL Division of Psychiatry as an associate professor, and I work at Camden and Islington NHS Foundation Trust on an adult inpatient unit. And the first slide that I've got is going to show you, we were all asked to show our clinical academic pathway, and really, without going through it in any detail, it's the next slide, Lisa, please. It's just to show you how long it can take. And, you know, it might feel painful how long it takes, particularly when one's doing a PhD part-time, but I do honestly feel it's worth it, because I have really enjoyed all those stages, apart from one, which I'll go into in a minute. So in my next slide, I'm just setting out some advice which is broadly very similar to the people who've previously presented, which is really be prepared to be rejected. The first time you may weep, but after a few you won't anymore, and it's just part of it. And as Andrew pointed out, it's often an opportunity to improve what you previously submitted. When you think about what PhD you might want to do, and this also applies to your dissertation in some ways, make sure that you'd be really delighted to spend a lot of time doing this for a substantial period of time. And my next piece of advice is about choosing your supervisors. When you're thinking about a PhD, don't be seduced by the superstellar professor of whatever. Choose your supervisors who will, on the basis of their reliability, will they be able to meet with you monthly, or will they be too busy? Are they prepared to go over your drafts and make really helpful, constructive comments? Are they going to encourage you and put you forward for opportunities? And I think these are really important things to consider. So in my last slide, which is the next one, again, I'm echoing the advantages and disadvantages that many of the other speakers have highlighted. And the major advantage of a clinical academic career is that it is so flexible and it is so varied and interesting. You have all these opportunities to collaborate. You might suddenly decide that you're interested in moving to a completely different area through some sort of flight of idea, and you'll be able to find somebody who'd be interested in collaborating with you. And it means, as Chloe pointed out before, that you can apply your research findings in your clinical post, and also in your clinical post you can develop hypotheses that you can test in your academic post. The disadvantages, as Natalie pointed out, is that you're spread across different jobs, and you do find yourself working to very tight deadlines for your academic work, sometimes with 24-hour turnaround to respond to peer review. And I suppose for me, the most difficult part was the bit just after a PhD, when you're looking at the next career stage. And this is a difficult time. You've got to use your networks as much as you can, build on your collaborations, and eventually, hopefully you will find either a fellowship or a permanent job, or will find some way of integrating your research skills, as Liz pointed out, in your clinical work. So that's it for this section, and I'm going to pass back to Sonia Johnson, who's going to chair the question and answer session.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much to all our speakers. I think that was a very interesting range of perspectives. I guess maybe the one thing I'd add to everything people have said is that you are also really very much needed if you decide to make research part of your career. There isn't anywhere near enough clinical research basically in mental health. If you relate it to the burden of mental illness and the very many problems for which we don't yet have effective treatments, there's a huge amount to do, and a real need for clinicians of all professions to go into research to do that. So if you like the sound of a clinical academic career, it may be a bit of a struggle at times, but you can be assured that you're really needed and that it's a workforce that we really need to expand. And that's perhaps more true than anything else with non-medical professionals. There are, I'm sure Chloe will tell you, there are nowhere near enough academic OTs, academic social workers, but really there aren't enough of any clinical academic profession. So we would really encourage you to say the routes can be a bit tortuous, but on the whole enjoyable. And I think we would really all encourage you to think about this if you find research appealing. So we've